welcome back again to the polemic pool. We're here with a guest today, and she's fired up, and so are we. We're going to talk about global warming, so we're fired up, and there's a cloud over our heads. And our guest is Ruth Harper, and I'll let you introduce yourself. I'm Laura Casaletto at the polemic pool in the American Opinion bookstore.
Thank you. Well, I'm one of the founders of the bookstore, going back 50 years this year.
Awesome.
So we've been around for a long time.
That's great.
And I've been member of many things, and we have many types of meetings here and so on, some of which I attend and some of which I don't. But it's a great place to meet, and we have, privacy. Plus, we have the whole room full of books next door and lots of backup for things. And if you're tired of the definitions on your, computer dictionary, which sometimes are taken from whatever, we can always double check with Noah Webster. We have his 1828 dictionary in the other room.
Ah, yes. Noah, save our butt.
Well, we have Steve Anderson here with us tonight.
Yes, nice to be here.
And I'm Jerry Bowes. And Ruth, it's your topic that we're going to discuss tonight. So expect a little give and take, a little, bit of a lively discussion.
Oh, she's down.
I would like it if you would start us off, tell us what our topic is tonight, and a few opening thoughts, and we'll just kind of take it from there, huh?
Okay, well, I guess I might want to call it the end of global warming. And I guess that could have two meanings, the goal of the global warming movement or its demise. I regard global warming as a hoax, and it has so self-proven. The various reports, the things that predicted the absence of the Arctic ice by this point in time or by 2013 or whatever, those, like the reports of Mark Twain's death, were greatly exaggerated, to say the least. And what people that are, older, such as I am, remember is that in the 70s, the big official politically correct scare was nuclear winter.
Yes,
we were going to, we've destroyed the climate and we're going into this ice age. And then when that didn't prove out, they just switched the dial, and the same people that had been preaching nuclear winter switched over to global warming. There's a lot of people that, are just kind of termed the usual suspects because they pop up, and whatever is the politically front thing, they're carrying the flag for that. And we here at American Opinion Bookstore tend to be the other side of the story. We are the people who don't just bleat in unison with the majority. And so I don't want to monopolize here, so I can throw it out to you guys to attack if you wish, or whatever. The way I see it, weather changes. And it changes, especially in Michigan, daily, hourly, weekly, whatever. In fact, if it goes a week with the same weather, I start to feel nervous. Too much sunshine. We're gonna
Exactly.
like June of 1988, I think it was. June is normally, Michigan is normally vibrant green, just so alive and so leafy and so grassy. And June of '88 was dry. There were cows eating hay out of ricks in barnyards, and that hurt me. I grew up with cows and chickens and horses and all that kind of stuff, and I had my feet on the ground and was playing in the creek and climbing trees and so on. And as my sister Helen used to say, these modern environmentalists are people who don't go outdoors. They have no concept of what's really going on, so you can feed them anything, and oh, really?
Yeah, exactly.
Well, I guess I should jump in and start addressing some of the points that you've raised. Let me start with one of the with a couple things, actually. One thing is that I do applaud skepticism. I consider myself a skeptic, and I often get into arguments, both on the left and the right, about issues because, I believe in empiricism and rationality, and we've got to look at facts.
Sure.
And so I think skepticism is a good approach to begin with. But I do have to take issue with the two major challenges that you gave to climate change, which was one, based on models and global warming not living up to past models, and the other about the 70s prediction of ice age.
Yes.
I'll start with the latter first, if I may, and I'll try and do these real quickly. There were proposals in the 1970s in regards to predictions of forthcoming ice age. This is true. There were scientific papers that were put forth, but it wasn't a preponderance by any means. These were minority positions. There were several, there were a few, and they were widely touted, but they were also widely debated within the scientific community, which is the norm for the scientific community to do. They flesh out issues, studies are made, further studies are made, more studies are made, more information is come by, and consensus about whether or not certain proposals and hypotheses put forth are accurate or not. They were dismissed rather quickly. And so this is often brought up as one of the red herrings in the anti-climate change argument, when it was actually just a minor fluke which had no lasting consequences whatsoever. It's been highly debated, and we've come such a great distance from it. Now the other one is about models. And that's, I think, is a bigger, stronger point that you've made. Because in the recent few years, the climate change models have not reflected the change in atmospheric warmth, the growth in atmospheric warmth, as were originally predicted. But then models, are just that. They're models. They have to be weighed against reality. And we have to see, well, what happened? What really is happening? It's not that there hasn't been increases in atmospheric temperatures, both in the stratus and substratospheres, but they weren't as great as predicted. But what did happen was that we discovered that the ocean is a greater heat sink than we thought it was. And what has happened is that the oceans absorbed a lot of the warming that we thought the atmosphere itself would. And the oceans have gotten warmer, and the result of that is increased melting of both the North and South Pole areas. So I'll shut up for a minute, but I like to address points as they come along. Anyone else got something to throw in?
Well, the reality has it that the polar ice caps are growing, both of them. In fact, you remember the embarrassing thing, I think it was December of 2013, a group of people of your mindset were going to Antarctica to show the devastating loss of ice and so on, and they got stuck in the ice of the Weddell Sea, I believe it was, as they were trying to go down next to this peninsula to show the loss of ice. Well, clearly they were wrong. And December, remember, is summertime down there. So they were caught in the ice in the summer, and that was an indication of the increase of the global ice. Similarly, there's all kinds of, I think a lot of us are drawn to stories of fuzzy things that look, like always so cute and white and petable, polar bears, little seals, whatever. And I'm drawn to this kind of article too. So I was quite surprised to find that far from, being these few stranded stranded polars floating on the icebergs or whatever, that their population has increased like 40% in the last 8 years, and there's like 50 times as many as there were in 1955. So, and these things are demonstrable. I mean, I have publications with the documents cited and so on, and it's just, we aren't told this by the major media. And so I have to ask, why? Cui bono? You familiar with that term? Who benefits?
Sure.
Who's done good by this, and so on. So then you start looking at, if they really, really believed that sea levels were rising, wouldn't they be selling all their real estate in Manhattan and San Francisco and so on? Wouldn't they be going in for mountain resorts? Or if they think that it's going to be warmer all over the world, wouldn't that be a great time to go up and buy land from Hudson Bay inland? It's probably pretty cheap. and they could get it. And then when the palm trees start going there and so on, they could be sitting in a pretty good position. And that stuff isn't happening. So I think even the wealthy people behind the funding of all this global warming stuff and the so-called climate change. You notice also that as soon as global warming really started to lose out, and by the way, that reminds me, I got to get back to your thing about the scientists and the consensus. There is not now, and there never was, consensus among real scientists, in particular climate scientists, but others as well. What happens, and some of this got out in the public media through the London Times, through the ClimateGate scandal, East Anglia University, where the professors were saying, well, we have to, depress this information and suppress these ideas or these facts because they don't align with the overall plan. So going back to the question, who benefits, not only who would or will, but who benefits, what is the major thing under attack in connection with climate change? It's our lifestyle, it's our energy in particular. To some extent, our agriculture, you mentioned the methane earlier and so on. But realistically, they are attacking energy and the production of energy in every way they can. And who might have a benefit, for example, in attacking coal? Well, maybe the oil people. On the other hand, oil is also considered a, big, bad, scary deal, and they make lots of fun of people with their SUVs and so on. But realistically, they've been shutting down nuclear and converting it to oil. So we have, over the years, or to coal, but I'm trying to remember which one Midland turned into. It was supposed to be a nuclear plant, which means a very small amount of uranium with very small ecological disturbance would have been able to run the plant for a long time. But they show these enormous cooling towers and make them into a threatening symbol. Do you know what the cooling towers really are? Basically, they're three things, I guess, counting what's in and around them. They're cement, they're towers, and they have pipes of heated, steam, basically, going around in them, and there's condensation. So if you stand in the middle of one, there'll be water running around. It's a wonderful echo chamber. It's fun to stand in the middle of one and, talk or shout or whisper or whatever and just hear. But anyway, they're not a scary thing, although the picture in a lot of people's minds of all this bad energy stuff, supposedly, includes those harmless towers. But anyway, if you've got the cleanest and safest and cheapest form of energy, i.e. nuclear, and you want to promote things that involve massive acreage covered with solar panels, for example, or those hideous monuments to modern stupidity, those bird-killing windmills. Yeah, these tall things. And, anytime I drive
turbines.
Yes, I drive back and forth on I-80 fairly often. I have a daughter in Denver, in the Denver area, so it makes it convenient. And you go along, and there'll be 20 or 30 or 70 of these things on the hills, spoiling the nice, prairie look and so on. But on top of that, you'll see maybe one lazily turning, and the rest not even moving in most instances. There's something really, really fake about that whole thing. Although, actually, one of the most exciting landscape things I ever saw was going through New Mexico in one of the rare times when it was foggy. And so there was all this mist, and all of a sudden the sense that there were big things moving. And then as we got closer and closer, they gradually revealed themselves as these wind things. But anyway,
I'd like to jump in
Sure.
too, and I know Steve would too. So, because you've made a lot of points, and I think we can start addressing them. Steve, what did you have?
Well, I really don't have a problem with much of what you say, in the sense that you can pretty much take any set of facts, and if you dissect them and interpret them a certain way, I can see where one could come to a completely opposite conclusion. There's a couple areas, though, that it's not so much uncomfort, but you seem to repeat the word they as if there's this monolithic kind of, group that is out to get the rest of us. And one of the methods by which they're doing that is by this hoax of global warming. I find that I'm not very much of a conspiracy-minded person. I'm very, very inquisitive, and I don't buy things at face value. But yet, I wouldn't throw myself into the conspiracy-minded person. That's number one. Last thing, and then I'll shut up. When you talk about motivation, show me the money or follow the money, I think you might agree, Ruth, that blade cuts both ways. There are certainly many petroleum, I can speak for several corporations that would prefer the status quo and not listen to this global warming kind of stuff too. So, in fairness, would you agree that there's money interests on both sides of this debate? You might argue one more than the other, but money flows both ways.
I get that. And as far as the they thing, you're right. I'm in the habit of doing that probably because there are so many people who have come to the conclusion that there are forces in the world that are doing this. But I did mention earlier, and I can perhaps elaborate a little bit, when something is an honestly allowed debate in the country, you hear things on both sides on a regular basis. Global warming has not been like that. And in fact, in the few spaces where something gets out, I mentioned the article in the London Times, this was when one in particular Canadian professor pointed out that all the grant money went to the politically correct position. All the grant money on the status changes, assistant professor to associate to full professor, that kind of thing, those were handed out to the PC people and to the PC people only, and other people were penalized, threatened, denigrated, whatever, just in general. And that's a part also of what that whole East Anglia Climate Gate thing was. And it's far from the only place. And I think earlier I alluded to the fact that there is no scientific consensus on this except among this politically correct supported elite.
I've got to jump in. There's
But
just
wait,
so
I haven't
much.
spoken yet.
I know. So Laura, please take some of my stuff away.
Okay.
Jump in there.
Okay. But rather than say, "Oh no, Ruth, I found something I don't like about what you said," I want to back the lens up a little bit. And global warming is such a big concept that I have a problem with it right off the bat, because I don't feel that we can predict what's going to happen to the entire planet. In the same way that when we look at outer space, we keep coming up with these rules and then having to change the rules. And that's a similar problem with looking at the planet as a whole. So, and then having to choose which side are we going to choose on this debate seems a little bit like they're yanking us puppets around by our strings. And I said they,
yeah.
and I also don't think there's a they. I think humans are mostly stupid and self-interested and then justify after the fact. But I definitely, will you all not concur, see that human beings are polluting the planet too much. So I think that is a problem one can address, remediate, change the situation for the betterment of those around you directly. And I think that when you look around you in the smaller scale and try to take action in your world, in your small world, you get much better results on a human scale. So I think that's very important. So I never want to debate global warming. I always want to say, my fellow human being, do you not think that we are over-polluting our planet and need to take steps to, scale that back? Because there are 7 billion plus of us, and there are, increased asthma rates, increased clouds of pollution. China is horrible with their parts per billion of pollutants and everyone wearing a mask and just a miasma of horrors going on.
Practically shutting down the Olympics.
It's saddening, as you pointed out, Ruth. As with a childhood in nature, it is a very sad thing to watch species being wiped out, etc. And then also, a quick point I wanted to make was that, kind of on your side, the opposing force to global warming is that it is time for another ice age. On the broad, okay, she's shaking her head no, but my understanding of science is that every 100,000 years, the entire planet will get cooler and warmer again, and that we are due for one of those. And again, that's such a huge model. Are we right about this? I don't know. But but those two things, if they are both real, should collide. And that makes all the models all the more unpredictable. So I am for problems that we can actually get our head around, and I am for sustainability in my lifestyle. I am for permaculture. I am for a revamping of many of our philosophies, and I feel that politicians make poor decisions when it comes to science. Their motivations are not practical.
Or pure.
Or pure. They are not good for directing us, except like we can call the mayor on the phone in this city. And it has always been a source of great comfort to me that I can see that guy on the street and walk up and give him a hug, and he has to talk to me. Whereas anything beyond the state level, I feel we're rather lost.
Okay, good point there. As far as the whole pollution thing, I started being a conservationist, not conservative, whatever. I'm not trying to preserve the status quo, but a conservationist as a fifth grader probably. And I still continue. When I take a walk in the woods near where I live now, I consider it sort of a people's park because it's not official parkland. There's a railroad and there's, somebody owns it, but their primary facilities on the other side of the creek and so on. So there's this tremendous area that we hike in, we utilize in that way. And I often sling just one of these plastic supermarket bags, bark at me if you wish, but I sling one over my arm, and then as I go by, if I find a foam cup or the remnant of some tin foil or something, I can put it in there. When I get back to the park, I can deposit it in their wastebasket, the park proper. And then there are other people in the neighborhood. There's guys with chainsaws, and maybe they burn wood, I don't know. But when there's a fallen ash tree or something across the path, we'll be climbing around it or over it for a while, and then all of a sudden one day we'll come and those parts will be chopped out and either stacked or gone, and things are taken care of. And it's a totally free enterprise, unofficial, cooperative, I guess you might say, but we don't meet, we don't discuss it, we don't vote, we just do. And that's the kind of thing that we should be doing, inventing and all this stuff, And all the government does is get in the way, and they are certainly part of the they, but not all of it. As far as things, there's the thing about, well, let's say we're polluting. Okay, where are we getting whatever we pollute with? We're locked on this planet. It's island in space.
Sure.
So we may recombine some things and say, oh, that is now a pollutant. But there are ways to uncombine. But interestingly, the powers that be don't want us to use these. The most common one is fire. When I was young, we burned things that were unsuitable to ship around, put in a landfill, whatever. It was a good way to get rid of certain types of infestation and so on. Now, we're prescribed from that sort of thing, and they take it over, and they preserve all this stuff in these weird landfills and so on.
Sure.
Or they dump it in the ocean or whatever else. But what I'm saying, I guess, is that you leave the people to tend to their environment, and they will. You make it somebody else's job, and then suddenly it's control. They've got their hand around your throat, and you aren't allowed, or you have to get a permit.
Well, let me try and address some of the things that you've all been talking about here a second, a little bit, as we begin to kind of wrap up things. I'm all for acting locally and thinking globally. I do so in my own personal life in small ways, and I try and make a contribution in that regard. And I applaud everyone who does that, like yourself and like Laura, and Steve does as well, as I know.
Absolutely.
So I'm all for that. But we have been talking about a global issue tonight. And there's just a couple things I have to speak to that have been brought up earlier. Some of your disclaimers about global climate change have been anecdotal in their nature, in the sense of like the 70s studies, for instance. The other being that a trip by a certain number of scientists who got caught in the surface ice. The fact of the matter is, in regards to the latter, is that there are bases in Antarctica that operate day and night, all year long, doing studies over and over and over again. Flights are made every day over the Arctic. It doesn't take a group of scientists going down on a little look-see to, be much of any kind of evidence one way or another. They got caught in surface ice? Well, you know what? It's only natural that surface ice in the ocean would be increasing. Because where does it come from? It comes from the land ice,
Like last
which
night's
is
weather?
melting. The land ice is melting at an increased rate. This is not disputed by any scientist. The studies are dramatic. The glaciers in Antarctica, in Anderson Sound, are moving at 3 times the rate that they were 30 years ago. Massive amounts of ice, fresh ice, is being dumped into the ocean. Greenland is even worse. Surface ice is up because land ice is flowing into the ocean. Also, the reason why it's said that there's a consensus on global warming by the scientific community is mostly based on a study of scientific papers from 1991 to 2011 about climate. All the climate papers put forth by climate scientists, climatologists in that field. And if they agreed with global warming or climate change, either in the basis of their works. And then those people were further contacted to see if their conclusion was correct, that they did agree with that. Of the papers that were put forth in that 20-year period, 97% came to the conclusion that there was indeed climate change.
Global climate
warming.
change.
Global climate change.
Global warming is an incorrect term.
You're right, you got me. So that's where that consensus comes from. And that's the idea that if you get three people, scientists who walk in here, and not weathermen, not someone who's an economist, but not a scientist, but actual climate scientists, three of them walk in here and say, well, I don't think we have enough information. 97 more who followed them and say, oh, but we do. We have it. We've got it. We have an entire history of studies that prove the point. And then you'd have another three come in and say, no, I don't think so. And then you have another 97 say, oh, but we do have a consensus. We do have this information. So that's where the consensus comes from. And from consensus comes action. If you don't have a consensus, you will not work on a problem. And that's where we are in the United States.
That's why I kind of took it away from global warming and said think about pollution, because I feel like the issue is so huge that if we debate it, we will all come to inaction. And if we look at pollution, we will act. And if there is global warming, that will benefit that problem by just doing more practical things. And that the fact that it's such a huge problem and hard to measure and hard to see, it goes against our human nature. So that's why I say, drive less.
Well, one of the things that I thought was interesting when you talk about all these articles and these people standing behind them, and it say, yes, the published articles, because it only takes a few editorial positions to control a whole lot of content. And so...
So you think there's a conspiracy amongst the scientific community?
Not the real the real scientific community is saying, look at us, we're saying no, and we're showing you this, and we're...
No, I think
for
it's
example,
really just talking points by the...
Here's this Rajendra
by the oil
Pashuri
industry.
with the UN's IPCC, and that was, International Polemic on Climate Change or something, that he heads, have been forced to admit there's been no global warming for at least 17 years, defying all their computer model style, their predictions, and it goes on and on.
But I got to jump in and say that in the past year, what I've been reading is that although the Arctic ice was thinning and receding in the past year or so, it thickens back up.
You're talking about surface ice.
No, land ice. Land ice is increasing.
No.
Yes.
No, it's not. All you have to do is, do you have Xfinity by chance? I refer you to the Vice report that was just aired Sunday night.
Vice is awesome.
Vice is absolutely, it's fantastic.
Yeah, I'm not trying to say that. I just don't even feel like I
daily
need to have an opinion on Team Global Warming, because we stupid humans will debate it, cancel each other out, and go down in flames with our stupidity, and meanwhile we will give all our kids asthma and pollute all the rivers.
Good point there. And the other thing, if there were warming, it's not that we puny humans crawling around like ants on this planet have done it, because now that they're out in space and monitoring these other places, they have found warming consonant with our prior stage of warming and consonant with solar activity. So the sun is still a much more powerful force in our day-to-day and decade to century.
You are making point after point after point after point, which is a list of phony arguments that have been presented by climate deniers, which are actually
religious term. We're heretics.
So this is a religious.
No, it's denied.
A religion, as I see it. I have always seen it this way. You've got people on both sides, and that's my problem with the issue. Is that it's true religion, and you're going to believe your set of facts. Like I can say, well, gosh, Ruth, you can call us tiny ants, but termites bring down houses, But I don't. Why engage in that argument when we're fundamentally on the same side as far as wanting to have a nice planet?
Because you can deal with empiricism and rationality, or you can deal with red herring arguments. And that's all I've been hearing is red herring arguments.
Let's say all of us agree that there's global warming at this table. Still, the politicians who run the country are going to play with us, and they're not going to make policy changes. But at a local level, we can make demands and get them met.
Well,
may I?
That's
sure,
it.
sure,
Yeah.
Steve. Sure, I've been talking too much. Go ahead.
Oh, wait, one more thing, Steve.
Oh, please,
Today's the
please.
4th anniversary of Fukushima.
Ah, very cool.
Yes,
Not
and-
cool, but very cool. I want to get back to this they thing again. Let me list some theys. The National Academy of Sciences, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, NASA, the EPA, the Royal Society of the United Kingdom, the Canadian Meteorological and Oceanography Society, the UN Panel on Climate Change. Now, I guess we could bunch them all into a they group, but the trump card is when the Pentagon, certainly no friends to many of the ones I listed, considers global warming as one of the most destabilizing forces
Yes.
on the earth.
And they are planning
Now-
for it.
And they
These-
already predicted and
so?
lost on the number of refugees that they expected to be climate refugees. I can't read you this whole thing, but among this is a list of the people who specifically have, and their credentials and so on, from these groups that you mentioned,
Yes.
NOAA and all the
Sure.
rest of them,
Sure.
that have said, wait, they're whistleblowers now. They're pointing out that this was all a false red herring thing. And
Would you agree that sea levels are rising?
no,
Well, they are.
No.
Reality has a way of butting in.
well, really, then why isn't Manhattan underwater the way they said it would
Because
be?
Manhattan's higher than areas like Bangladesh, which is losing land, which is area like southern
The
Florida,
subways
which is
did
losing
just
land.
get flooded in Manhattan.
Yes, it did.
They did.
Well, during what, a
So the
hurricane?
elevation of different areas is going to take longer to have problems than ones that are at closer to sea level.
The most dramatic effects will be downstream, like
Sure.
by 2100,
Well, no point arguing that one.
17% of Bangladesh will be lost.
Yeah, that's the kind of stat I would dismiss
Yeah,
with Ruth.
Right.
Yeah. But sea levels are
Well,
rising.
you dismiss it with if you dismiss it, and people do. If you dismiss it, then you leave yourself vulnerable to the problems that this creates when it comes about.
Kind of like people
Yeah.
who deny God and they're going to go to hell when they die if he's there.
Well, I do like that. I applaud you on that.
Sure. Yeah.
That's nice. But I deal with empiricism, rationality, measurement, which goes on every day in the scientific community, and that's where I put my dollar.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, this has nothing to do with nothing, and maybe that's why I bring it up. If you remember the excuse me, for some reason I can't speak this evening, congressional hearings on the tobacco CEOs back years ago, and each one vehemently argued that there was no connection between tobacco, cigarette smoking, and heart and lung and cancer issues. Now, what does that have to do with global warming? Well, in a sense, it doesn't have anything to do with it, but if you take most doctors and they've seen the lungs and the hearts of people that have smoked for a while, and they've done all these studies, and I listed all these groups that are not intertwined, and if anything, most of these groups, I think one of these groups would love to prove the other one's wrong.
Right.
Science has a way, unlike Ruth's rendition, science has a way of actually not trying to validate. You get a lot more mileage and more grants out of coming up with something that isn't quite so. If I could prove that there was no global warming going on and I was a scientist in that field, my gosh, that's where I would go. So this they thing, it's too it's just too it's too convenient, and it's using the conspiracy card to a degree that I'm a little uncomfortable with.
At a small note, then I'll let Ruth finish up. Because we should be probably winding up.
Yes.
A small little thing. The same ad agency that was involved with the cigarette misinformation campaign is involved in the global warming effort.
Oh, okay.
Go ahead,
Well,
Ruth.
an ad agency is one thing. I mean, talk about, specific, maybe red herring details.
You two you're having a good red herring fight, slapping each other with herrings.
Yeah.
It smells like fish in
Fish,
here.
yeah, right.
Gotta
Well,
have a little bit of that.
Yeah.
realistically, I would challenge you
Sure.
to read some of these things
Okay.
and see, because now I speak as someone with a major in a science,
Sure.
and I came from a family of chemists and mathematicians and so on. Logic and all this are not unknown to us, even if I tend to be anecdotal, because I've learned that people learn better when they have a story.
Yeah.
That when they get a picture in their mind, bingo, then you've got something. When it's all, well, my expert's bigger than your expert,
Right.
doesn't count for much. But
Right.
Except the truth.
no, some of the major scientists of the last century have signed on to the position of being heretics in this particular religious war. So I guess I could just leave it at that.
Sure.
Well, we do appreciate you coming
Oh,
into the midst,
absolutely. It's
like you
wonderful.
have, Ruth. I mean,
Yeah.
it's not everyone will sit down with three people who have an opposing opinion and express themselves thusly, and I applaud you for that.
You may be overestimating.
Well,
Thank you.
Let me finish by saying, Ruth, I appreciate any time that you can get Jerry's blood pressure up a little bit. I am so pleased. So thank you so much.
Well, you're very welcome. And I've got lots of topics.
Oh, I think Ruth should come back. Definitely. Put the chlorine in the pool.
Yeah.
It gets a little
great.
tepid in here sometimes.
Yes.
Oh, it does. And I guess I should mention that it's my turn next to address a topic before us. And so for our next round in the polemic pool, I thought I'd go back to a topic that we've touched on, at least, not too terribly long ago, on democracy, and some of the efforts nowadays to increase it in our society, to efforts to promote democratic participation, and efforts to decrease democratic participation. Are these good things? Are these bad things? Let's take a look at that. We can discuss the various aspects of our republic and its relationship to its democracy, elements of promoting it or not. What do you think, guys? Next time around?
Well,
I'll drink to that.
That sounds great. I'm not fond of the democratic system in general, but
Well, there's your chance to rip on it, Steve.
there you go.
Do you want to invite Ruth to be in this conversation?
Ruth, would you be interested in joining us?
No.
Whoa.
I wish I had a picture of her face.
It's like a lawyer. Never ask a question that you don't know the answer.
Yeah, and I just did.
In one sense, I would be delighted. I really enjoy this kind of thing. It's good for me. I haven't done enough of it lately. On the other hand, I am in the midst of editing a book, and I'm also trying to write a significant segment, and so I keep getting into these things that I
Oh,
love
sure,
to do.
sure, sure,
And
sure.
so that
I
was
know
the
problem.
that was
I
the
getcha.
kind of moral
Okay.
dilemma here. Do I stick with what I'm supposed
Well, we'd
to
like
be
to have
doing,
you
or
as a
do I-
guest, maybe down the road
we
when,
don't
there's, when
prepare.
there's some time. Well, yeah, that's sometimes more obvious at times than others. Well, thanks again for being part of
Yeah,
this program.
thank you so
And
much.
to everybody who listens, thanks for listening. We enjoyed ourselves, and I think we all kind of said some important fundamental things about how to think about things that underlay what we talked about.
And how about a small little ad for this wonderful bookstore? Can you give us just the name of the bookstore, the address? Is there a email address where we can contact, or it's just a nice place?
Okay, it is, and it's interesting, and we are operated strictly by volunteers. So on some lucky Saturdays, you might be able to come in here and find Jerry, who's a World War II veteran.
Awesome.
He doesn't come every time, and we try to cover, but can't necessarily always make it. But yes, we're at 1369 Plainfield, 1369. Easy to remember. I always do that count-off thing. Somehow it sticks better. And it's less apt to be dyslexic, you know. 1, 3, 6, 9. You've got a logical progression here, Plainfield. And there is a store number in the phone book, but I would offer my own cell phone number as being more frequently populated than the store is. Because I'm pretty much on tap 24/7, except when I'm doing something like this and have shut the thing off.
Sure.
But that is area 616-318-2002.
Fantastic.
616-318-2002. And normally I would be able to tell if there's an event that night or if somebody's working at the store.
Sweet.
And if somebody wants an appointment or wants a chance to bring a group in, I could probably work that out too.
Oh, that's awesome.
Well, thank you, Ruth, and hey, everybody, it was a good time.
All right. Have a good one.